So now what we have to do is solve our weight equation based on our mission fuel fraction and our similar aircraft data empty weight fraction. So what is the equation that we're trying to solve for our weight estimation? Let me just pull that up. I'll move this equation over here. Keep it close for later or for reference. So this equation here is our gross weight relationship for our aircraft. So if I'm going to add maybe some space here, I have to add some more information about our mission. I might want to include some payload weight. And let's say that payload weight is 1,000 pounds. So I want this aircraft to carry a 1,000-pound payload. I'm going to see how this varies if I change my payload. But this is essentially the relationship we're going to solve. We have our fuel weight fraction, 0.291. We don't have an empty weight fraction, but we have a relationship between our empty weight and our gross weight. And we know that relationship for a given gross weight. We could estimate what our empty weight fraction is. So we'll have to go through some iterative calculation in order to solve this. So there's a few ways you could do this. I'm going to show you one way that I think is fairly easy and quick, and it uses iterative calculation within Excel, which can save you a lot of time if you want to just look at variations or how different parameters affect your weight estimation. It's useful at this stage because we don't really know numbers for sure. A lot of our inputs are approximations. We want to know the sensitivity and which parameters are providing the greatest influence on our estimation, and they're the ones that we want to make sure we really get accurately as we work through. So let's begin. First thing we need to do is, in order for the iteration to work, we need to have a first guess so that there is an actual number calculation in the cell and it doesn't just give us errors. So my first guess is just going to be 10,000 pounds. Let's pick a number. I'm going to set my initial guess equal to that first guess, and then once we have a reasonable value for our empty weight based on the relationship below and this first guess, then I'm going to set the cell equal to this equation here, which is how we will iteratively calculate our empty weight fraction. Now, in order to do this iteratively, what I'll first do is, under my Excel preferences, I will go into the calculation tab and I will make sure I use iterative calculation. So let's just assume that's off, and I'll show you what happens if that is not turned on. So my empty weight is going to follow the relationship we have down here, so these parameters. So I just want to make it a function of these parameters. If I later on find a better fit, or if I find new aircraft data and these values change, I just want to update these values and it automatically updates the numbers above. I don't want to write it down in two places. So what I'm going to do for my empty weight, if I take the exponential of both sides, my empty weight is just going to be the exponential of a times ln of my gross weight value that's up above, plus this value b. So I'm going to write this as equal to exponential of a times the ln of my, that value, my gross weight, plus this parameter b, and I'll close parentheses and set that equal. So based on my trend, if our aircraft was 10,000 pounds, then based on the similar aircraft data, we would likely have an empty weight of around 5,700 pounds. So that would mean our empty weight fraction is about 57%. We just take the WE divided by W naught. And then our fuel weight fraction is independent of this, but I'm just going to write our fuel weight fraction just so we get a sense of how much fuel we have. And that's going to be equal to our gross weight times our fuel weight fraction, 0.291. So now everything is parameterized. If I change anything under these green columns, these are all my inputs, then everything is automatically updated. If I add more aircraft to my database and my best fit changes, then again, it's automated. So I don't have to worry about rewriting equations or inputting more values or doing any more work. So let's see what happens if I just make this guess now, or this next iteration, the function here on the right. So I'm going to make this equal to, I'm going to say I have a payload weight of just 1,000 pounds. I know I've left out a crew, but I can add that in later on. I can include crew as part of my payload if I want, or if I can include them separately, that's fine. So I have my payload weight divided by, in brackets, 1 minus my fuel fraction, 0.291, minus my empty weight fraction, which is going to be my empty weight divided by my gross weight guess. Now I have to find a way to click this cell. If I can click this cell, well, I just know it's E5. And close brackets, and if I do this, I have this error now. It says I have some circular referencing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my settings, preferences, I'm going to click calculation, and I'm going to click use iterative calculation. The default setting is probably good enough for our purposes. A max change of 0.001 pounds is the units we're dealing with, so that is plenty, more than plenty. And 100 iterations, I want to limit how many times it tries to calculate this. We'll see what this does. So I got an error. It gives me a num because my initial guess was 0, and I'm trying to calculate empty weight fraction. I have WE divided by W naught, so a number divided by 0 is going to give me an infinity, so that's going to be a problem. So what I'm going to do to get this to work the first time is, instead of being E5, I'm going to change this cell to B5, which is our first guess. So it will be approximating as if our value is constant. Still give me a num error, so that's unfortunate. What I might have to do then is just, I'll copy the original equation and I'll paste that in after. But once I have the value working, okay, so I have it working. Now I'll paste in my equation, and because I have real values, it's giving me trouble.
6.5 hours later.
All right, so here I'll explain what I'm doing. So for this iteration to work, let's make this a bit bigger. Essentially what I'm trying to do is I want to get away from having to manually input a guess every time. So what I could do is, if I wanted, I guess 10,000 pounds, and then I just keep manually inputting in a new guess. But I don't want to do that. I just want to change a parameter and then have it automatically update and give me a converged guess. So what I'd like to do is, from this first guess, I'm going to first time, just once, manually put it in, and then I'm going to calculate my empty weight. So I'm adding these indexes here, n, and n is for the whatever guess number I'm on. So let's say the first guess, n is just 1. So for n1, my first guess, I have 10,000 pounds. I calculate my first guess of my empty weight based on that first guess of my gross weight. And then I'm going to have this n prime. It's just an intermediate calculation of my gross weight. So it's still for that first guess, and it's based off of the first guess values, WE over W naught n, right? So calculate it from here. So I have these two values. This ratio is just the second line divided by 10,000 pounds for my first guess. So the relaxation is, in case this guess is too severe, I want to slow it down. So I don't want my next n+1 guess to be exactly this. I want it to be somewhere between my first guess and that next intermediate guess. So I'm going to just count up some fraction delta. So my next guess will be my first guess, W naught n, plus delta, in our case we chose 0.2, times the difference between the intermediate guess and my original guess. So W naught n prime minus W naught n. And then what I'm going to do in Excel is I'm going to set the cell where I put in my first guess, W naught n, that 10,000 pound guess, equal to this n+1 guess. And that will give me a circular reference with this relaxation built in, and an easy way to get out of it in case it does give me an error down the road, that I can quickly, without having to rearrange a bunch of equations, fix my issue. And then Excel is going to just automatically jump through these calculations over and over and over again until we get the condition where the cell W0n is approximately equal to W0n plus 1. And at that point, that value for both of those will be our estimate for our gross weight of our aircraft. So your convergence requirement in Excel to stop is when these two values are within 0.001 of each other. You can change that to whatever you want within Excel, but that's just the default right now. So let's show what that is. I'll show you what I mean by manually first. So you can see my guess, intermediate guess here is 7,200. So if I were to just change this to 7247 manually as my guess, this continues down to 6939. So I'm going to change that to 6939, 6900. It keeps going down, 6895. I'm going to try and get ahead of it, maybe 6893. So we're within a pound. You know, the numbers I'm choosing are not that accurate, and I'm just kind of like pulling them out of thin air for right now. So maybe within a couple pounds is fine. So I had to manually type in those values that many times. I don't want to have to do that just if I change lift to drag ratio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back to 10,000 pounds. I can see that the next guess is 7,200. Here is my intermediate guess. I am just going to set my initial guess value to my next guess value. And of course, it gives an error again.
Approximately 10 hours later.
All right, I think I've gotten to the bottom of it. Seems to be an error. For some reason, it just won't display a number format. I opened up a new workbook and it was fine. So I'm not sure what happened. What I did is I set this function equal to an if error function. So if there is an error, it is just going to default to that initial 10,000 pound guess. And if there is no error, that means it's converging and there's no issues, then it will just set itself equal to the next guess.